In today's video, we are going to be looking at how you can start preparing for your medical or your dental school interviews. Once the UCAT and the personal statement are out of the way and you have submitted your UCAS application, sadly, the hard work does not stop there. You still have to prepare and sit your interviews. What we see time and time again at FutureDoc is students underestimate how much work and how difficult it is to interview, particularly if you've never interviewed before. So we would really recommend that you spend a lot of time preparing and practicing, even if you haven't received an interview offer yet. It is better to start preparing sooner rather than later. But how exactly do you begin, and what should your preparation contain? Well, that is everything that we are going to be discussing in this video. So let's get right into it. Okay, so the very first thing that you are going to want to do is figure out what kind of interview are you going to be taking. In other words, what format is your interview? At this point, you have obviously applied to either for medical or for dental schools. So you should be able now to go onto their websites and figure out exactly what kind of interview they are going to use for your 4 specific choices. So the first thing you want to figure out is it in person or is it virtual? Back when COVID-19 happened, most medical schools and dental schools conducted their interviews online. I even had most of my interviews online too, back when I applied. So some medical schools might still be doing that. So knowing whether yours is in person or whether it's online is going to help you prepare for either or both. The key to preparing for an in-person interview is to practice as much as you can with somebody in person. It is really important that you try to simulate the same environment that you're going to be in. So I would ask a friend or a family member to sit down with you and to ask you some questions in the format of either an MMI or a panel interview, which we'll go into later. It will be quite difficult at first to try and answer the questions properly, which is why it's so important that you try and do this as much as you can. But with time and with practice, you should see an improvement. You might also have a virtual interview, and these interviews happen through a PC or a computer, and often with specific software that the university will require you to use. Again, the most important part about preparing for a virtual interview is to try and simulate the real thing as much as possible. So again, I would ask a friend or a family member or somebody that you know to maybe set up a mock interview via Zoom. Sit in front of your computer and practice answering the questions online. Some key things to consider when you are sitting virtual interviews is that you will need a quiet space with a decent background and no noise to distract you. You will also need good Wi-Fi and connection, so make sure that you have set all of those up. The second thing you're going to want to consider is whether the interview is an MMI or a multiple mini interview, or whether it's a panel interview. The universities that you have applied to may give you information on timings, but they also might not. So you are going to have to practice under some kind of time conditions, but this may not be known to you, which can make it a little bit difficult. A panel interview, also known as a structured interview, is when you are interviewed by one or more people. The interview may be behavioral, based around your past behaviors or experiences, or it could be situational. This might assess what you would do in a hypothetical scenario. Panel interviews tend to be competency-based, which means that the questions that they're asking you are based on competencies that they would expect a good doctor to have. So it is a good idea to familiarize yourself with the NHS constitutional values, and also the ones that your specific medical or dental school values. You will likely be asked an opening question, and then the interviewer may follow up with additional questions. So when you are practicing, get used to managing your time so that you can handle providing concise answers to a variety of questions. The alternative to panel interviews are MMIs. Many medical schools, in fact, most of them will use the MMI format for the interview for their selection process. The MMI comprises of a series of many different interviews known as stations. You will usually have between 5 to 8 stations, and each station will typically be between 5 to 10 minutes long. There are usually either 1 or 2 interviewers in each station, and you will have to move between station to station. The MMIs means that you will have more opportunities to answer questions with different interviewers. And this means that you will have more than one opportunity to highlight or to demonstrate different skills and attributes that you have. So if you don't do too well in one of the stations, it doesn't mean that you will fail or that you won't get an offer. It just means that you will have another opportunity to highlight those skills and to answer the question in the next station. An overall score across all of the stations is typically calculated to decide whether you are successful or not. Whilst it might seem like a lot of information to take in and you are moving around the stations really quickly, the MMI will have been carefully designed to give you enough opportunities to show the interviewers why you should be selected for their medical school. Again, when you are practicing, try and replicate this as much as you can. So try to get multiple different people to ask you questions within a short time frame if you can. And if you want to know more about MMIs and the types of questions that you're going to get, then check out this video here where I outlined some of the most common questions that you'll get asked. The next thing that you're going to want to do is familiarize yourself with your own personal statement. Many medical and dental schools will use your personal statement as a starting point to ask you questions, so make sure that you know it inside out. If you have mentioned a specific book or an article or a placement or an experience that you had, make sure that you have read up on all of these things and you can talk about them really easily and quickly. Also, try to read through your statement and think about potential questions that you could be asked. If you have spoken about something really specific, for example, a certain hobby or something else that you do in your spare time, this could be something that interviewers may zoom in on and may ask you further questions. So be prepared to answer in more detail. Moving on, make sure that you know some of the most common questions that you will be asked in an interview. Questions such as why medicine, or why medicine and not nursing, or tell me about your work experience. These are all extremely common and you can probably expect them to come up in at least one of your interviews, regardless of whether it's an MMI or a panel interview. Make sure that you take the time to think about all of these questions and to build a sort of reserve or to have an idea of how you might want to answer them. Now, that's not to say that you need to learn an entire script and recite it off by heart when you're asked the question, but it's more about thinking about these questions and how you want to approach them if you do get asked them. The next thing you're going to want to do to prepare you well for your interviews is to stay up to date with current affairs and hot topics. Another very common type of question that interviewers ask is, tell me about a hot topic or tell me about something that is in the news recently relating to either medicine or dentistry. Medical and dental schools want their prospective students to have their finger on the pulse when it comes to all of these topics. So knowing about the NHS, the history of the NHS, medical ethics, famous cases, and insights into the profession are key. We have actually made some videos about all of these things, so you can check them out up here. Now, the final thing to mention to help prepare you really well for your interviews is to practice frequently and to record yourself. Once again, the most important part of your preparation is actually practicing answering the questions. Trust me, it is much harder to articulate what you want to say because you might know it in your head, but being able to express all of those things clearly and concisely is much harder said than done. And also answering all of those questions under pressure while you're nervous is not an easy thing. So the more that you can get comfortable with that feeling, and the more that you practice and you're asked red herring questions or things that you're not expecting, it's gonna help you to be more prepared for when you encounter that in the real thing. Also, whenever you are practicing, make sure that you ask for feedback so that you are continuously improving and learning how to be better. Something I always tell students to do is to record themselves. And I know it's pretty scary and you don't really want to do it at first, but it is so useful just to see how you come across and what you look like and to hear your tone of voice. because it can be a little bit of a shock if you've never seen yourself before. You'll notice the filler words that you use and what your body language looks like, and you'll be more conscious of those things the next time that you practice or that you interview. So it is extremely helpful to record yourself. So that wraps up this video on how you can begin preparing for your interviews. If you would like extra support to increase your chances of getting in, even after you've submitted your application, then check out the FutureDoc website, where we will be able to coach you and practice with you to prepare you properly for your interviews. If you have found this video useful, don't forget to leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.